delighted to start with our first speaker, which is Ismail Ajef. Please, Ismail, take your time, please.
So this section of my project, that is, I'm looking at the security implication of climate migration in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. So as we all know, climate change and then forced displacement is something that is alarming. And when you look at the World Bank 2021 report, for instance, by 2050, the world is projected to have 216 million climate migrants. Out of this, sub-Saharan Africa constitutes like 40%, that is 86 million. And this has caused a lot of security implications that needs attention. So looking at it, there is the need for human security framework of analysis to kind of analyze the link between climate change and climate mobility and then security, how it affects the human security. So these are the questions for these studies. So what are the existential threats that climate change or climate-induced migration pose on Africa, and also how does governments also approach this issue? And also the third question, look at the existing policy framework and how they are also the implication on climate mobility. So looking at it, how all the security policies and other climate-related policies also help to shape in addressing the adverse effect of climate change on migration. So the objective of this is to identify human security implications regarding climate mobility, and also look at the security threat in general, and also to see the challenges or to analyze the challenges in the existing policy framework, and also suggest new policies. And then I'm using a qualitative method approach, and I'm taking interviews and also looking at official documents from IOM and also other states of that state, because I'm taking it the state one. I'm taking it from Ghana because that is my case study area. So I'm taking primary data from them, and also I'm using a snowball sampling and a positive sampling approach to kind of get the climate migrant. But for the positive sampling, I have a target respondent, the target researchers and also policymakers that I also contact them. And the vulnerability data too, I get it from displacement and track matrix from the IOM. And these are the number of interviews that I'm also conducting, and these are the people that I'm contacting for the interview. So when you look at Africa, this is the map of Africa indicating the climate stress. So when you look at these sections, you could see that these are the areas looking at it with the critical issues. For example, the Sahara Belt, for instance, recently a lot of people are moving from this region due to drought and other issues. And as a result of this drought too, a whole lot of challenges with regards to even conflict over resources, and also people moving to southern part of the West Africa, for example. A lot of people are moving here to Ghana. Ghana, for instance, people from Niger, Mali, in the Sahara region are moving down here, especially the herdsmen, the cattle herdsmen. Most of them move in order to find grazable land for their animals. And also when you look at Eastern African, for instance, Ethiopia, Sudan, and these sections, a whole lot of issue with drought that has also caused a lot of effect on agriculture, which has caused a lot of people moving mostly from the rural areas to the urban sectors or to the urban centers. And I think this year there was a critical issue in Madagascar too, a lot of farming issue whereby there is food security issues over there because of flooding and also drought in coastal erosion in some places of Madagascar. So these are all affecting people and also forcing them to move. As they are moving, a whole lot of implication that we see from. So when you look at a picture, for example, we can see this is issue of droughts and also flooding in cities. These are also water issue whereby the people have to travel long way to find water for domestic and also for their animals and other stuff. And also it also has implication on agriculture, whereby products or agriculture products are not able to grow the way it's supposed to be. So when we look at it this way, these are preliminary findings. So there's structural violence. When you look at structural violence, it's something that is caused by states and state institutions, because in most of the sub-Saharan country, they don't put climate change as a major driver of migration. So now a lot of attentions in some countries have been shifted to other sectors of the economy rather than paying particular attention to the climate threat. So with the structural violence, the institutions are not doing what they are supposed to do. In that case, it's affecting the people. So whilst the institution can do something about the situation on the ground and they are reluctant to pay critical attention, they are causing or they are contributing to part of the security problem. And also the food security issue that is as a result of fluctuation in rainfall and also extreme hot conditions that affect production, agricultural products. Also, there's personal insecurity issue due to unemployment and poverty. So unemployment and poverty causes a lot of people to be insecure. Already, a lot of people on the continent has problem with employment also, and poverty issue is also one of the prominent issues on the continent. And with the climate effect or with a climate threat, is also kind of worsen the situation. And also we look at the economic aspect too. The economic security is also there because the states are shifting attention now to climate change. So the shift of attention also kind of since they already have most countries have economic crisis and they are not able to meet the demand of the people, and the inavailability of funds to kind of even create new job, the existing one whereby most also depend on the agriculture, for instance. The reduction in agriculture also put pressure on the state as a whole, whereby new jobs are not being able to create it, especially in the rural areas. And there are also climate-related stress. For example, this year in Central Africa and some part of West Africa, to outbreak of cholera and also malaria issue. All these are some of the issues that are caused by the poor sanitation. That is also from the environmental perspective. So with the issue with, and then the whole lot of environmental diseases that are also happening, and the inequality issue, which is also a part of the human security issue, because there is already issues with some places are having resources whereby the centers or areas where climate change has become a major issue, people need to move where, and with this issue, they end up in conflict over the existing resources and also social amenities. And all these kind of put threats to their sustenance. And when it comes to people who are also who do not have the means to move to, like the immobile ones too, they are trapped in their areas of their place of settlement. However, they don't have the means to move, and this affect their livelihood and also threat their personal, kind of put their personality insecure. So conclusion, climate mobility has become an existential human security threat in South Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa. However, when you look at the commitment, there's a commitment problems regarding the policy framework, because the whole lot of policies that the state government or the states, various states have, various states have policies that they can look at it to ensure that the policies that shape climate change and also policies that shape how people are moving. However, the frameworks are there, but the implementation has become a problem. And a whole lot of issue regarding some complaint of inadequate finance to kind of implement such policies. But like in the foundings of in some rural areas also indicates that most of the rural, like the local community members or authority, do not see the essence of paying much attention to climate change, whereby also kind of not even following what the state principles, the state framework towards migration, climate migration. And in all, like, it's kind of causing a lot of conflict issues, especially in the case of Ghana, for instance, the Fulani herdsmen or the cattle railers who are moving to different parts of the country, especially the southern part. It ends up a whole lot of conflicts between the local host community members and also the climate migrants who or the newcomers to the communities. So these are the short version of what I'm doing currently. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ismail, for your presentation. So what we learn, or what I learn out of your research, is that the climate migrants, which come as newcomers to the communities, may create problems. So would you look on a specific group here, on a place, and will you do interviews there also?
Yes, for the case study, I'm doing interviews to look at, especially I'm focusing more on the policy aspect. So I'm looking at it from the local community, how they also contribute, or the local governance, how they also contribute to the national framework and the expectations from the climate migrants themselves. For example, most community members see the climate migrants as intruders or people who are affecting their sustenance. However, they also contribute to the livelihood of the community. In one of my interviews, a group of cattle railers told me that, like, let's say they have 50 cattle in a year, they give 1 or 2 to the community, which the community kind of sell to contribute to the community developmental project. So that aspect has not been understood by the local community members, because they see them to be kind of burden to the society or kind of sharing the limited resources. However, there are a lot of positive aspects that they can be also taken from the climate migrants themselves, because they are moving to contribute to the community. However, the state do not have sustaining policies to kind of integrate them to the communities or even to the state. So this is one of the major issues that I have found so far, kind of understanding them. Thank you very much.
That makes it much clearer. Thank you so much for presenting us, for introducing us into that field of knowledge. Our next speaker, our next PhD student, fellow scholar, how to say that, is Deepak Taro, and he's speaking on Nepalese labor migrants. So Deepak, please go ahead. We are listening to you.
Thank you, Professor. Well, okay, so all right. So yes, so as you see the topic, so I have listed above, and yeah, so my research is all about inflows of Nepalese labor migrant workers during the COVID-19. And this is a case of Kathmandu Valley, because Kathmandu Valley experience and has been experiencing still very like problematic situations because of like COVID pandemic, time and again, because like so like we still observe that there is like effectiveness of lockdown, but recently so it has been lifted. So but mostly migrant workers are facing that the problems which was caused by the COVID-19. So yeah, and so basically uh, so COVID-19 so has been a very big issue for all the labor migrant workers who are surviving on their wage, let's say the remittances that they often send from the destination countries to support their families. But due to the COVID-19 or during the pandemic, like it was not possible to go abroad. And yeah so I have collected some data. So during the COVID pandemic, like half of the millions migrants of Nepali were ready to come back, but there is no exact data because some of them were dead before coming back to Nepal. So according to yes, so this is according to data that I have mentioned, like Nepal Association of Foreign Employment Agencies. This is 2020. So when the government of Nepal declared the lockdown on 24th March 2020, at the same time, so there was like public call to call, let's say, to welcome back all the labor migrants. But there were some of the policies as well to bring them back, but it was not so easy. So yeah, and most importantly, COVID-19 has intensified unemployment issues in an battered economy, because Nepal has still been facing very unemployment issues. And because of COVID-19, or when it was like globally outbreak, then it hit on the employment issues, even uh, more worse than before. And yes, so like we can see, so these problems, and it's very difficult for the government of Nepal to uplift, or let's say to upgrade the like employment opportunities, and on the other hand to settle down the occurring challenges in relation to the employment. Well, yeah. So regarding the research subjects, so like we can see that there are lots of research projects carried out on COVID-19. Like even we can see some of the best researchers who have already done, but I think they miss. Like there are some particular areas that I have tried to address them. Yeah. So all right. So yes. So regarding the objects, so like these are the true objectives that I have tried to address in my research project. Yeah. So basically, this research, tries to understand the social perceptions of recent labor migrant workers when they were socially stigmatized during the COVID-19 pandemic, because like they were not so easily accepted by the society, or and the government as well, because there were so many restrictions to come back. That's why they were socially, let's say, boycotted, or let's say they were not like socially accepted in a very easy way. So yeah, I think so this issue I think was not addressed by the previous researchers. And yeah, the second objective is to see the integrating process. They have only raised the questions, but they have not, tried to answer. They have not yet like responded particular answers to the integrating process of those, returned migrant laborers in the existing labor market. Well, yeah. So regarding like methodology, so I use secondary research, as I said, uh, that there are several researches done on migration. Like return migration. Let's say COVID-19. They have tried to address some other issues, but like I think so their research like researches were somehow helpful and useful as well to help me understand what kind of issues were addressed and what are the existing issues which are still unanswered or unaddressed. So it was, I think, was a very good moment that I could grab the moment to address them. And yeah, so basically during the COVID pandemic, so none of the people who were come out, uh, or let's say no one was, allowed to go. So during that time, so I only applied qualitative interviews by using different social networks. Facebook, basically Facebook was one of the prominent methods applied for collecting data because so there were some of the friends whom I personally knew them, uh, also came back from different countries. So then yeah, so it was also easy for me to talk to them and ask their personal problems and their personal perceptions in relation to the COVID-19. And and yeah, so another thing, like I personally call them because into 2020, when the first time COVID-19 like came to Nepal, and the government of Nepal declared the lockdown on 24th March. And so yes, I was trapped because I could not go anywhere. Even I could not leave the Nepal. So this is the situations that I had personally observed some of the very critical problems that labor migrants were facing at that moment. Uh, yeah, so not only that, to get some of the realities in relation to COVID-19 that labor migrants were facing, I try to connect with local stakeholders who were taking the responsibility to arrange the facilities for, let's say, quarantine and all. So I personally talked to them. All right. So yeah, so I have tried to grab or let's I have tried to try to demonstrate some of the best findings with the pictures. Yes, so like you might have seen somewhere if you have like explored some researches on COVID-19 conducted in Nepal, then this picture is really pitiable that labor migrants including domestic and most probably okay, those who were domestic, but some of them were also foreigners who just returned because of the declaration of lockdown. And yeah, so when lockdown was publicly declared by the government of Nepal, because of fear and anxiety of the very long term, lockdown, so like people started to move to their homes on foot, because that time so no vehicles were available. And so this is the reality that they had to walk more than 500 kilometers to reach their homes. So this is the realities that the labor migrants had to face. And all right, and stigmatization. So by the way, so like when COVID-19 was declared and there was the effectiveness of COVID-19, then I personally observed that people were like people means like labor migrants who just came back from different destination countries were not easily accepted by the societies because of the fear, or let's say because of let's say the anxiety, the situations that that came up with their arrival. So yeah, I have tried to let's say figure out with the help of the percentage based on the interview responses. So like as you can see, like individuals 26%. Like some of the peoples who personally do not like to welcome, even they were their own relatives and the friends. And society, yeah. So by the way, like this is not a new thing that the society was really scared of coronavirus. And regarding government, because government itself declared some of the restrictions for the returning migrants. So definitely there were lots of like restrictions that returning migrants had to follow, or go, let's say they have to adopt before coming back. All right, so regarding vulnerability, so this is, so I have tried to explain under vulnerability with the help of this picture. Like you can see a woman who is walking, and like so during the COVID pandemic, so like as I said earlier, that no vehicles were ready. And not only that, even while walking let's say somewhere from Kathmandu to somewhere, maybe their countryside, their homes place, then that time even women were exploited in different ways. So this is the situations that domestic as well as returning, or let's say returned migrant laborers had to bear or had to face. So that kind of vulnerability took place, or let's say appeared during the COVID-19. And yeah, so regarding human insecurity, so like if we see, then there is no any provision of insurance, though it was formulated during the COVID pandemic. So yeah, I'm trying to try to wrap up. So like because of the insurance, like so many people were dead and there were no any compensation, yeah, and economic burden. So like when COVID-19 outbroke, and so many labor migrants had to come back without paying their loan, or let's say their subsidies. So like I have tried to try to show in mathematical way. Okay. And yes, when I asked the returned migrant, then they clearly said that so there is no life, so they had to come back, because even there was no any provisions for reintegration of those migrants. That's why they did not have any alternatives. So that, yeah, so when I asked them, so like most of the returning migrants said, oh, here is no life, so I'm sinking in debt, so like I have to return. And yeah, so this is one findings. And another, so this is, by the way, like you might not have heard somewhere, but in my country I heard these new forms of discriminations. Like so this is the first time that I came up while asking the respondents because Well, even in Nepal, like they were not, like familiarized with their own relatives, their own, citizens. Rather, they were, looked very differently, as if they are new. They are like a citizen of another country. So that's why they just failed or realized a lean, though they are the citizens of Nepal. Okay. So yeah, so this is all about my presentations, and yeah, finally, so I think so I'm taking a very long time. Okay, thank you so much. So I'll wrap it in later.
Thank you so much for your very lively presentation, Deepak. And I see there's a certain tendency to look, which is good, I think, to look on the receiving, the places which are receiving migration, return migration under the circumstances of crisis, so the pandemics, or as we heard by Ismail, under the stress of climate change. So if we look on the receiving societies, we see quite a lot of tensions coming up here, and that is totally under-researched by now, I would say. So I thank you for that. And also I liked your point about the new technologies. So on social networks such as Facebook, for example, to bringing this in, what does it mean for social policies? Also the floating workforce we see is an important point when we look on social policies. So thank you both of the presenters. We now hand over to our third presenter, which is, one moment, Tasnim Khan, and she's looking on policy-related mental health of migrant women. And I just hand over to you, Tasnim. Take the floor, please.
Okay, so just to kind of reintroduce myself quickly, my name is Tasnim Khan, and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Waterloo in Canada. And the topic of my webinar discussion is equity in immigrant health. So I'll provide a brief overview first of the immigrant population in Canada, and then next I'll focus on research as a pathway to achieving health equity for immigrants in the Canadian context. And I'll be specifically focusing on one part or one chapter of my PhD research today, which is not about immigrant women, but generally on immigrants. So to provide a bit of background, Canada is one of the top host countries for immigration, with approximately 8 million immigrants. Majority of the immigrants arrived to Canada through the economic program. And it's been the case then that since the 1980s, immigrants to Canada from Europe have declined, whereas those from visible and racial minority majority countries and regions have increased. So this includes immigrants from Asia as well as the Middle East. And although the social and economic integration is a key goal of both the government as well as nonprofit and other organizations in Canada, immigrant health is not often at the forefront of these projects and these goals. And that's why the social aspects of immigrant health are the focus of my PhD research. So my PhD work is grounded in the ideology of health equity, according to which all members of the society should have the available resources, opportunities, as well as fair social treatment to be able to achieve their full health potential. And health equity is also interconnected with the larger issues of social equity, and it shouldn't be viewed just with the narrow focus of equity in access to healthcare only, which is often the case in the field of health or public health. I think the pathways through which social and health equity could be achieved for immigrants in Canada in particular include research as well as policies and social programming. In this presentation, I'm focusing primarily on achieving health equity in, equity in health research, and how this research could then be used to inform evidence-based policies and programs for immigrants. So the starting place to achieving equity in health research is to use theoretical frameworks, specifically frameworks that could reflect the composition of the different subpopulations in a society and also their needs. In the case of immigrants, I think using a social justice approach appears to be appropriate. For example, through the use of a social justice approach, health inequities or disparities could be highlighted by placing immigrant issues at the forefront of health research projects. In particular, using specific theories, such as the intersectionality theory could be useful, which highlights the importance of focusing on different aspects of an individual's identity. So in the case of immigrants, obviously it could be immigration status, along with other aspects of their identity, including their income, gender, occupation, as well as their education status. So guided by these frameworks, then for my PhD research, I mainly carry out quantitative empirical work, and most of them have focused on immigration status as well as the socioeconomic characteristics of immigrants to identify any differentials in their health and in comparison to Canadian individuals. So for instance, for one of my projects, I've used the Canadian Community Health Survey to examine mental health outcomes of immigrants in Canada, and then compared these health outcomes to Canadian-born individuals. The Canadian Community Health Survey is a national survey, and it's conducted by Statistics Canada throughout all of the Canadian provinces. So for this specific project, a couple of the objectives were to first examine the risk of poor self-rated mental health for immigrants and compare it to that of Canadian-born individuals. And then secondly, to explore different social factors in relation to the mental health of immigrants. So this includes social risks, some of the social risks as well as protective factors. So when I carried out statistical models and when I controlled for social and economic factors in the study, what I found was that immigrants and Canadian-born individuals didn't differ in their risk for poor self-rated mental health. And this finding is in contrary to what the healthy immigrant effect predominantly states, according to which immigrants have a better mental health on average compared to Canadian-born individuals. And when I studied income as a risk factor, what I found was immigrants with a lower income adequacy had a higher probability of poor self-rated mental health. And this was in comparison to individuals with better income and better mental health. And to dip a little bit into the resiliency factors, I looked into a sense of belongingness to community, and what I found there was that immigrants who reported a higher sense of belonging to their community had a lower risk for poor mental health outcomes. So a few implications of my research are as follows. First of all, although this current analysis is one of the few that doesn't show a healthy immigrant effect, it still brings to light the importance of further examining immigrant mental health and letting go of this idea of focusing only on the healthy immigrant effect, as it hinders further discussion in the area. And a replication of this analysis might show that it's true for other health outcomes, or it might not be true for other cohorts. So this finding needs to be replicated and studied further. With regards to policies and programs, those which are specific and targeted towards specific subgroups could be useful. For instance, policies and programs for low income as well as immigrant women might be more beneficial than broad policies. And with regards to inclusion and diversity, there's often emphasis on integrating immigrants, which is great. But I do think there's a system level disparity in this kind of approach. It is beneficial for immigrants to upgrade their skills and language abilities, but there's also a need, especially in the workplaces as well as public spaces, to educate the individuals in the host community about the different cultural aspects, festivals, as well as value systems of the newly arriving majority, visible minority, and racial minority individuals. So this will help bridge then the cultural gaps and also eliminate some of the burden that's placed entirely on newly arriving immigrants into Canada and pushing their way into the system alone. I would just like to thank my supervisor, Dr. Martin Cook, as well as my committee members, Ashok Chirezia and Farooq Naeem from the University of Toronto for their ongoing guidance and support, and Statistics Canada for the provision of their data. And thank you everybody for listening to my presentation.
Thank you very much, Tasneem, for your presentation, and to shift our attention to the need of targeted policies, which themselves are in need of data, of better data, if I understood you well, right? So if you focus on certain groups,
yes,
yeah, you would need to have targeted policies, you would need to have data on those groups also, right?
Exactly, yes.
So that is an interesting point, because we see ourselves confronted with some sort of messiness of data we have at the moment. So
yes,
thank you for contributing to this aspect of social policies very much. And we already come to our last speaker, as we already run out of time. And our last speaker is Chen from the KU Leuven and the Free University of Leuven. And she will look more on a personal level on strategies, social networks of African students in China. Please, Lynn, take the floor, take over the floor. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. I will introduce myself first. I'm a PhD candidate from University of Leuven in Belgium, as well as University of Free Brussels in Belgium. And my research topic for my PhD project is focused on African students' migration to China and their study experiences and adapting experiences while they're studying there. And this presentation, I'll focus on one of the chapter of my dissertation is the coping strategies of African students in China prior and during the COVID pandemic with systemic and non-systemic restriction and discrimination. This paper focused on unveiling the current limits to China-Africa higher education student mobility in both systematic and non-systematic way, respectively in education, labor market, healthcare, and social media sector. We seek to gain insights in their life through the theoretical lens of incomplete frontier mobility, conviviality, and engagement coping strategies, adopting both conventionally and online ethnographic findings. It demonstrates how African students reject taking for granted categorizations, and in facing adversity and friction, they found various ways to overcome the obstacles prior and during the pandemic. As the background data information, the African students population in China has grown from 1,384 in the year of 1999 and has grown up to 81,562 in the year of 2018. The data currently is not available after pandemic started because a lot of African students, including other international students, has left China after February 2020, and the student visa open to the international student has then suspended until this year, 2022 September. So the new cohort is not following between the year of 2020 and 2022. So the data updated background is as such. And the theoretical framework we used in this chapter is engagement coping strategies, as well as conviviality disposition and migration social network and social media. We apply this theoretical framework into the analysis of the data in the fieldwork I have collected during 2019 of academic year through 3 different fields. in China. It's Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, including 130 student in-depth interviews and observations of their study lives in China, and the follow-up online interviews up to 2021 April. So this is the data background and theoretical background of this research. There are two common cases scenario African students facing when they're starting to have their university lives in China. The first one is restriction of obstacles they faces in their lives, and that often there's one term that mentioned by multiple African student interviewees that I've met and during my fieldwork is 没办法, means no solution in Chinese, which is one of the first Chinese terms they've learned through their daily life practice in scenario they encounter frequently. And that response they received from the Chinese university administration or governmental administrators. And the other scenarios they face is the perceiving discrimination. There are one question asked by 3 different interviewees, like one in Beijing and 2 in Shanghai, when I during interview, coincidentally, it's the same, is why Africa is translated and abbreviated as Feizhou in Chinese. The question has been raised during these 3 separate interviews, and in common Chinese context and Chinese language for textbook when they first learning Chinese as a foreign student, it's the understanding of Fei, the first character of Chinese description of Africa, is referring as wrong, negative, denial, mistakes such as 非法 illegal or 是非 right and wrong, especially for beginning Chinese language learners. They do not acquire more complex usage of meaning of this Chinese character. This character can be otherwise in more complex way in to translate it as better or better than usual, but it's not at the first learner can understand. And this discrimination is raised from different perception of African students, and as well as the daily life encounter of discrimination they face. That this is a more complex case we will research on. And this chapter will focus not only on what kind of problem or restriction they face during their study life, but also how they found out the way of solving these problems or finding the resolution for that through the social network of their construction. Analysis of this paper will, prior pandemic, would focus on 3 different phases: the arrival and preparation phases, including adaptation of arrival of the digital divide, linkage of digital ties, and accessing to banking and mobile payment system in China. And the second phase is study phase. We'll focus on the adaptation of African students using the banking system language, mediation, and obstacles of the healthcare system they adapted in China, as well as the after graduation phase. We will explore the situation of career market and entrepreneurship difficulties for African students in China. And at the arrival phase, this story is told by one of the students from Ethiopia. When they first arrived in China, they've often faced the scenario of the digital divide of digital pace in China by the Great Firewall set by the government to block the IP address within China to access several social network websites and search engines from the Western countries. The African students need to install a VPN application on their devices to get access to the digital space outside of China when they're studying in China, and need to prepare multiple VPN applications at the specific period such as during the months of National Congress of China, or during the month of the National Day in China, and when the government tried to modify the public opinion in a strength way during that period, the Great Firewall will be upgraded, and as well as the VPN application need to follow up the upgradation of the Great Firewall to across the blockers of the Chinese digital space towards the outside. So that's first adaptation for the digital divide for African students. And with this background as such, there are multiple social networks set up or used by the African student community in China to search for a solution when they're facing the restrictions and discrimination to find a way out. There are within university social network, both online and offline, is the class network. They use applications of WeChat or the Tencent QQ application to communicate all of online as well as interpersonal communication. And the African Student Association network of the university, which is constructing by the African students themselves. And later, the University International Student Association, including both administration from the university as well as the student association organized by themselves. And the next level of social network is the African country national mates network across the city they live in and the province they live in, or across the greater China area online as the most way of their communication. And the next is more official, the National Embassy Network. It's also be reached online by the Chinese social network applications such as WeChat, and as well as across the university and official network is the traders network, especially for the fields in Guangzhou. African students have a really current and really intense communication with the African traders community, that when they find a solution they face during their life, the traders community is more easy the way for African students to search for solutions. And as well as the Pan-African traders community across different country of origins of African traders as a network for them to reach out when they're facing problems. There are digital ties built up by the technology itself, as well as the student interpersonal communication itself. They use this kind of social network both in China, WeChat, and the Western application of WhatsApp to communicate with the friends back home. And they also communicate through different languages while they're choosing facing different situations. When they communicate back home, some of them are using this case on the presentation, using email to call the family because there's not enough internet connection in her hometown, but there's application can use the phone data to across the internet connection when they call back from China. And there are a community building by the WeChat group for their countrymate in China. And the student there will have often different organizations for a resolution for people facing health emergency or temporary financial difficulties. The group members around the whole China will help them to donate money through the WeChat group of their countrymates. And this is built up on the trust within the WeChat group and trust within their countrymate. That is the social network for them to find out resolutions. And there are some bank payment issues have situated when the African student in China first need to, especially on their digital payment methodology, they have the requirement of the real name authentications. This will not easily be assessed when they first arrive, before they have a Chinese phone number or before they have a registered account in these applications. And languages can both be mediation and obstacles for communication. For some of their study program, they require the student to get the standard test of Chinese language of at least level 5 to get access and starting their program of study. If the student hasn't passed this test for 3 times, they will be a dropout of their program. There are adaptations for the healthcare system as well. There, for the health insurance for students, there are limitations for communications. And when it's really hard when they're facing emergency issues, especially for the cases in Guangzhou, the healthcare system is within several hospitals that link to the university. If they get injured outside of the area, they will need to first pay the full payment of their health insurance first and reclaim it back. It's more important when they need to first notice the health insurance agency before they're using the system. And the health insurance agency is not often running during the weekend. So this cases, the need of help from their national network or the social network of their own for emergency help or financial help is really necessary when they're facing the system. And for the medical student in practice, within the health system, it's really difficult for them to communicate with the patient and professors. And sometimes it happens for this discrimination and lack of trust from patients when they're facing African students, medical student practice in the Chinese hospitals. There are also problems when they're facing the labor market. The labor market has the supports from the university as well for the African community for open up the African Student Employment Expo, as well as the talent summits for job fair. But for instance, for the African students who want to be an English teacher in China, there will be the difficulty they're facing, the discrimination they would had. The priority of the employers to employ the English teacher is not the English language as the native language or as their education language, but as well as their ethnicity and the skin color. For example, some of the Russian and French candidates are more preferences to be hired as the English teacher compared to the student from African country, even though their national language or the official language of education is English.
Lynn, we should come to an end by now.
Okay, yeah, and during the pandemic, they are facing difficulties, and they use this kind of social network as a way to commute and comfort each other and share the information, as well as share their video arts to calm down the community and to find a resolution during the pandemic conflict between the Chinese community and African community in Guangzhou in the year of April 2020. And we come to a conclusion that technology can be difficult in towns across the digital divide, but the social network constructed by African students can help them to overcome many obstacles and gain the status of global cosmopolitan students. When they are in China, they build up the convivial disposition, and through the multiple spatial and digital networks and through temporal linkage. And this is my presentation today. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much for presenting us a bit of your research. I'm very glad we heard here also about the constrictions, the conditions under which you have to do your research with the pandemic, which is an important point. We heard that in Deepak's presentation, we heard it also in the first presentation a bit. And now you claim that this is an important part and you do research as well. And also the role of social networks, the digital divide, I think that those are very important topics. The diaspora you speak about is absolutely central. So I want to thank all of the 4 speakers. We will have a next round of PhD researchers in January then for the next round, and then in February. For today, I want to stop here. Thank you all of the speakers again.